Take each game and its merits there.
Okay. Well, hello and welcome to the latest episode of Each Game on Its Merits, where we go down through the history of the FAI Senior International Team and go through every single game that they have ever played. If you were listening to previous episodes, you would have heard us talk about the friendly between the Irish Free State League and Glasgow Celtic. You would have heard us talk about the team that went to the Olympics and beat Bulgaria in a glorious 1-0 win, got knocked out by the Netherlands in the quarter-final. And when they did, they eventually got on 2 days later to organise a friendly against Estonia. So with us, as per usual, is our resident historian, Jerry Farrell. Great to have you here again, Jerry.
Hello, everybody.
And also we have, for those who are watching on our YouTube channel and our visuals, we have Kevin Robinson, who is the grandson of one of the players who played in this famous Estonia game. So Kevin, it's great to have you here.
It's a pleasure to be here.
We'll chat about your granddad now in a minute, once we get through this game, Ireland Estonia, Jerry.
And we have, for those watching, we have our Estonia jersey.
Yes, from my collection, we have an Estonia jersey. This was worn by one of the players who got sent off in the original playoff, and people remember it. And I think this is his jersey for the return game when we qualified for the 2012 European Championship. So, and we're excited that Bohs have just signed an Estonian player,
an Estonian centre forward for next season.
Exactly. So we're pumped talking about this at the time of recording.
At the time of recording.
So Ireland, anyway, Jerry. We've just been knocked out of the tournament, and we have decided to stick around for a while. And we've decided, because Estonia have also been kicked out of the tournament or been knocked out of the tournament, that we'll play in a friendly. So the team is slightly different than the team that would have played in the other games.
Exactly, Alan. Yeah. So on our previous episode, we had Jurit, our Dutch historian friend, who was saying that the Irish had been very busy at the Olympics. Obviously, the first team to go over before all the other athletes is the soccer team that goes over. The officials there, people like James Brennan, Joe Wickham and others, are very busy networking. They're making connections with other football associations. Ireland officially becomes a full member of FIFA. Prior to that, they were kind of a intermediate member, because new members can only be added at the FIFA general meeting, which takes place obviously enough in Paris during the Olympics, which makes sense. They're organising the football tournament. So this is a big networking opportunity for the FAI officials. So very quickly, they're knocked out on the 2nd of June, as we've mentioned, against the Netherlands. And by the 4th, they're playing Estonia. Estonia are knocked out as well, so they're looking to do the same thing. They're looking to prolong their stay in glorious Roaring Twenties Paris, and they're enjoying themselves by all accounts. We have a future guest coming up, Mick Keelty, who mentioned just how much they enjoyed the nightlife and the atmosphere of Paris. Not so much the food. Apparently, living off bananas as a staple.
The Estonians literally went bananas.
They literally went bananas.
Yeah.
And of course, this, as you say, the team is very different, because the players who didn't get a chance in the first 2 games, they all kind of get a run out. And when you read the different reports, it's quite confusing, because there's a little bit of lack of clarity over who we think played in those games. But we're pretty sure we have the proper first 11 for the Estonia match, and I might just run through it if that's okay.
Go for it, yeah. So
Paddy O'Reilly of Athlone Town is in goal. So O'Reilly has been the main keeper throughout. Tom Murphy, St James's Gate. Jack McCarthy, Bohemians. John Thomas of Bohemians. John Joe Dykes of Athlone Town. Tommy Muldoon of Athlone Town. Christy Robinson from Bohemians. Frank Gent from Athlone Town, who was scored in the previous match against the Dutch.
Yes, who he slated.
Who was slated, but he keeps his place.
He gave him a very rough review there in the last game, but he kept his place because Joe Kendrick was obviously still injured from the first game. Yeah. Okay.
Paddy Dirty Duncan, who's kind of been one of the star players, the St James's Gate players in there. Charlie Dowdall, who, it's a bit surprising Dowdall hasn't featured up till this point. He'd be one of the more high profile players in the league. He's done very well for St James's Gate.
Handy with a gun, I understand.
And the brother as well. So
yeah.
his brother John is, I think we might have mentioned him, his brother John was in the IRA, and he produced a gun at the first FAI Cup final to get rid of Bob Fulham and Dinny Doyle and a few other Shamrock Rovers players who had burst into the St James's Gate dressing room.
Totally understandable.
And look, there's a version of the story that apparently fired a shot into the ceiling and all this.
Right, we don't condone that. No, that's bad form.
And the final player there on the wing is Johnny Murray of Bohemians. Now, as I said, there's
basically 3 clubs. Sorry, Athlone, Bohs, St James's Gate.
Yeah,
that's it.
3 clubs. And I think we mentioned before, no team before or since has ever had 5 players on an Irish international team Athlone Town holds that record, which is amazing when you think about it.
Wow. Okay, so we win the game. I'm sure people don't want to go into sort of gory detail of minute by minute, but we do win the game. Paddy Duncan scores in do I have it, the 15th minute? Chrissy Robinson scores, Frank Gent scores. So it's a good win. We win 3-1.
Yeah, so it's 1-1 at half time, and then we kind of prevail in the second half. We have 3-1 win, as you say. And Robinson and Gent, who I was so critical of. Gent has 2 games, 2 goals, not a bad return. And I think you've done a bit of research. Well, funny enough, here's the thing. Of the games we play in France, this is the best attended match. There's over 3,000 at the game.
Right.
This is because it's not clashing with other high profile games, which, as we mentioned previously, when they're playing the Netherlands, when they're playing Bulgaria, there's other high profile games with bigger, more established nations playing. So that basically draws the floating fan. So this isn't in competition, so we have 3,000.
It's not part of the Olympic Games. It's separate to it. It's because these two teams are still in Paris. Why don't we organise a game? And so on the face of it, Ireland have performed in these 3 games in Paris. A team that never played together before, a new nation under the flag for the first time. They played 3 games. They win 2. They lost 1 narrowly. That's not a bad return. The Estonian team, I did a bit of digging into the Estonian side. And it's quite tragic, actually, what happened to a lot of these players. So a lot of them didn't survive the Second World War 20 years later. So we have a chap who's Otto Silber, who's executed in December from 1940. We have a Hugo Volley, who dies in a Soviet prison camp. We have a Harold Karman, who is executed in 1942. We have a Vladimir Roxan, and my pronunciation will be very poor here, but he died in a Soviet prison camp. We have another chap, Henrik Paul, who didn't play that game but also died in a Soviet prison camp. Elma is another one. Edward Elma. He was executed in November 1941. Other players didn't play that game. Deported to Serbia, fled to Sweden, fled to the USA. It didn't. When you talk about football and moments in time, when you think about this collection of men who represented their country in the Olympic Games, in the fullness of time, it was a sad end for many of them. 6 of them, as you said.
Absolutely. Look, I suppose it's worth saying as well, but 1940 Estonia is invaded by the Soviet Union. That's the last time they get to play an international match as a national team until the 1990s. And 1991 is the next time they get to play an international game as Estonia. Yeah. One thing we should mention, one guy who does survive,
the goalkeeper,
lives into relative old age, and another one of those really interesting multi-sports players. So Evald Tipner, who's plays his club football for Sports Tallinn. The Estonian National Cup competition in 2012 was renamed after him. He'd won it as a player, and he was also a hockey international and a bandy international. So a multi-sporting, talented person. So I suppose any team that's competing now in the Soviet Cup, Flora Tallinn, whoever, you're competing for the Evald Tipner Cup. So he's obviously considered one of the greatest goalkeepers of all time, and so we remember Mark Poom from his Derby County days. But Evald is the man to emulate.
And he won 66 caps, which is quite a haul of caps for somebody in that era. Just because I went into a dark hole of footballers who died in world wars, there are 3 Irishmen, and you know a lot about at least one of them here, Jerry, but 3 Irishmen who died in world wars. So Dick Moore, internationals. Dick Moore was a Linfield player who died in 1918. He was 51, but he got 3 caps in 1891. Barney Donaghy, he's an interesting chap who was from Donegal, played for Derry Celtic, and he got a cap in 1902, I think, against Scotland. But Harry Sloan, who was the first player ever to score a goal in Daylewin Park, Bohemians player. Harold Alexander de Barbazan Sloan, what a great name. Fantastic name. 8 caps, 5 goals, scores a hat-trick against Wales in 1906, and he dies in the Somme.
Yeah, in 1917, he's in an artillery division, and he's killed. And quite a very tragic history, because he has a son also named Harold Sloan, who's killed in 1942 fighting in the Second World War. Right. And his mother, and apparently from photographs that actually Kieran Priestley had showed me, who's another Bohemian historian, very similar looking men, almost clones of each other, father and son, but a hugely important player for Bohemians and for Ireland. So he and Eamon Gregor, the most capped players ever to play for both, 8 caps. He scored 5 goals. He scores a hat-trick in a 3-all draw with Wales and Wrexham in what is the first international match ever recorded on film. And you can find, we might put a link in the show notes there, but there's clips of that, and there's a plaque actually on Wrexham Stadium. I visited there last year. There's a plaque commemorating that game, being recorded on that. He's also the first man to score in Dalymount Park. He scores the opening goal in the Bows Shells match in 1901.
Which we won 4-2, am I right?
That's correct. And he's a hugely important player.
You'd know it was 100 years ago we beat.
Exactly. Yeah.
Or longer. Yeah.
But a hugely important player, a very popular player in Irish footballing circles, and he's one of those players that's the older generation, when they're in the 40s and 50s, when they're talking back of the good old days. Harold's one of someone who's always mentioned, and he's from up around Ashtown, so where the old Candleworks used to be, he kind of lived in that part of Dublin, so what was a very rural area at the time. And then I think he ended up moving with his family over towards Blackrock direction, and that's where he's living when he kind of he's retired from football, and he enlisted, I think, in 1915 and is killed in 1917. A very tragic story.
So I just find something incredibly poignant about a photograph of a group of men who played a football match together. Such an innocent thing to do, to represent their country, and then so many of them 20 years later were gone for such tragic reasons. Anyway, let's go back to the Irish team. Great, Kevin, that you're here with us, Kevin Robinson. Christy was your grandfather.
Yes.
What memories or family stories do you have about Christy's football life, and of course his brother Sam, who also played?
I actually never met him. He died 6 years before I was born.
Okay.
But there's obviously family folklore. Christy was born in 1902.
Okay.
Sam, much bigger man in stature, born 1904. They grew up in Church Street in Dublin, across from Church Street, church number 38, I think was the name of the house in my research. They grew up in a time that was very volatile in Ireland. They witnessed a lot of atrocities by the British forces, especially 1916, which drew them into, as probably a lot of their contemporary friends around, young men, into the Republican movement to, and they joined up and they fought for our country.
Yeah, and they were soccer people, soccer fans.
They were soccer all their life. Yeah,
right.
They played football. They played street football. They played in the Phoenix Park, there was football pitches up there, and there wasn't many parks around inner city Dublin along the quays at that time, but they played up there, and they became heavily involved in the Civil War and the War of Independence.
Kevin, you might tell me just the significance of your own name, because that's a family name, and where that came from.
Yeah, Jerry. Well, Christy Boyd was with the H. He was captain of the H Company IRA, old IRA, on the day that Kevin Barry, they did the ambush on the Monk's Bakery, which tragically went wrong, and Kevin Barry was subsequently captured and eventually hung in Mountjoy Jail. But 18 months later, my father was born, and he was named Kevin. So obviously my grandfather, Christy, called him Kevin
After
Kevin Barry.
And that's why
hence my name is Kevin.
Right.
Kevin Christopher.
That's incredible.
So that's just a little bit of a little bit of history there,
What do you know of his footballing career? Because obviously, from my own research into him, he was a very successful player. He's the man who scores the first ever goal in the FAI Cup. He scores for Bows as they beat Athlone. He's a hugely successful player. He wins league titles, he wins cups and everything like that. And of course, we're talking about his role playing for Ireland. But what do the family know of? His role playing for Bohemians and for Ireland and other clubs.
Well, playing for Ireland was the big thing, especially the 1924 Olympic Games against Estonia, and he scored. And his brother Sam was very, very proud of him. And they all met him at the station when they came home, and Westland Road, they arrived, and there was a big family gathering apparently back in the 1920s, and they and a crowd of people, fans. This was big, this was huge. I mean, the Football Association of Ireland were only 2 years old, derived from the Leinster Senior League after the split. Yeah. And to represent his country was just an amazing thing. But what fascinates me is they all paid their own way.
Right.
Their expenses were paid by themselves.
To get there.
And, you think it was 100 years ago. Yeah. But they paid their own way.
Because we spoke about the game against Glasgow Celtic, which was supposed to raise money in order to go to the Olympics, but it didn't raise as much as maybe they had hoped. So they asked the players to put their hands in the pockets, and they would have had to take time off work.
Yes.
So Kevin has just left the army, or Christie just left the army by that stage, hasn't he?
He left the army, and this is his opportunity to represent his country, which he was very, very proud of to do through family circles. I've heard the stories, and to go to the Olympic Games and represent your country was just incredible. And of course, being the first Bohemian to score the first ever goal in the FAI Cup, and we go on to the great 1928 team after that, which
his brother Sam, or Jeremiah, right?
Yeah.
He had we'll talk about him again in future episodes, but he went on and became an international as well in later years. But he had a rather tragic role, or your family had a very tragic sort of story from Bloody Sunday in 1920, where Sam was involved as a scout, I think, of one of the the squad assassinations that morning. But his own first cousin, so your grandfather's first cousin, Perry Robinson, was in Croke Park as an 11-year-old, sitting in a tree, watching this game between Tipperary and Dublin.
Yeah, he was the first on Bloody Sunday. Of course, Sam was involved on Bloody Sunday morning.
Yeah, Mount Street,
in Mount Street, and he wasn't supposed to be, but he was called up fairly late to one of Michael Collins' men. It's all written there, and
I think he had to blag his way in because he was so young. I think he had to convince people
there's a story goes that he went up to be interviewed by Michael Collins, and he told him he was 17.
Yeah,
he was actually 15.
Did Vinnie Byrne vouch for him? The famous, okay.
And Michael Collins said, "Well, someone get that child and bring him home to his mother." And he stood up, he stood his ground, and he said, "I'm good enough to do the job," and they became friends.
But Perry Robinson, anyway, this 11-year-old child, first cousin of your grandfather, sitting in a tree watching this match.
Yeah,
what
and he
happens
was the first person to be killed on Bloody Sunday.
Shot dead
through the back and through the arm, and
Only
died the next day.
11 years old.
Jervis Street Hospital.
So he's the youngest casualty,
Well, Jerome O'Leary then.
Jerome O'Leary,
There was a younger boy, 10 years old.
Sorry, you're right there. Yeah, but that's an incredible history, and of course they were. To go on then and play for your country must have been a great thrill. And then of course in later generations, Aoife Robinson also plays for Bohs, which is a wonderful kind of squaring of the circle, if you like, of the family tradition.
It's come right down, and all Bohemians connected. Like Aoife, she as a young girl, she was a footballer. She loved Bohemians, and I used to bring her to 1 or 2 games, and she got the chance to sign for Bohemians with the ladies team, and she's still there to this day.
Yeah. So, I mean, what we're trying to do, we mentioned to you before, is to make these, including your grandfather, full internationals, because for some bizarre reason, and we can't really get my head around it, but like these games in 1924 haven't heretofore been recognised by the FAI as full internationals. There's a question mark over because they were amateurs or whatever, but it seems that every other international association have recognised these as full senior internationals. I've learned, thanks to Jerry, that the Uruguayan crest has 4 stars over it because FIFA have recognised that they're 4 times world champions because they won the 28 and 24 Olympics. What would it mean to your family, Christy, if the FAI were to come forward and say, yeah, Christy was a full international, here's his senior cap?
Well, I think they deserve to get full international honours for their country.
Yeah.
What they did for Irish football at the time to represent their country in the Olympics as full, and it was full international. It's recognised by FIFA as a full international, and I think the FAI need to, come on board and say these men were fantastic men. To make their own way over with their own expense. Loved the honour of putting on I was going to say the green jersey, but they actually wore blue.
They wore blue jerseys,
which was commemorated 2 years ago.
That's right,
in the Eibhilin Stadium when the Irish team wore blue in a friendly game. On the anniversary of the foundation of the Football Association of Ireland. I think they deserve to have full international honours.
And did they have any quirky stories from their time in Paris, or were they going to tell them? Maybe did they leave it in Paris?
Say they left it in Paris. Yeah.
That's brilliant, Kevin, and it's so interesting that you're called Kevin because of the Kevin Barry connection. That's really, really interesting.
Yeah,
it's quite poignant, isn't it?
Thank you.
Well, that's brilliant. Look, thanks so much for that. Our next episode will be about Ireland USA, Jerry.
Which is an interesting one. We're talking about these games being recognised. We're leaving Paris, we're leaving France, we're coming back to Dublin and Dublin.
We'll always have Paris.
We'll always
have Paris, Jerry.
But we're talking about the first home international. So this is shortly afterwards. The USA are on their way home from the Olympics as well. They played an additional game. We've played Estonia, they've played Poland, and they're coming to Dublin. And
prohibition is raging in the States, so they probably want to come to Dublin to...
They're going to enjoy themselves.
They're going to enjoy themselves. Okay, thanks for listening to our Ireland Estonia episode of Each Game and Its Merits. Our next episode, as I said, will be about Ireland versus America.